big shiny red button has been pressed.
Hello everyone and welcome to this newest edition of Aeronautica. This is Remlace from 40k Theories.
Hello, and this is Fiaura. I got sidetracked with conventions, but we're back.
And in today's episode we're going to take a look at the aircraft belonging to the forces of Chaos. So if you want to give your little disclaimer firstly.
Okay guys, so this is just a reminder of how this works, as well as my disclaimer that I am a scientist and I can be wrong. The way I'm going to approach these vehicles is as follows. I'm going to see how well they potentially fly, what they can do to maneuver, and avoid damage. This is both using mathematics on paper and putting them into a wind tunnel. I will then be doing the calculations to figure out if they actually can fly, and if the claims made by lore on their speed, weaponry, maneuverability, and armor are actually visible on the vehicles, and if the vehicle is actually able to do that. For testing for each model, I take either a 3D plastic print, or we actually get the physical model itself and go to the University of Delaware Department of Engineering and use their wind tunnel. The aircraft is sometimes broken by this. I did break one. I'm sorry to the person. But we then calculate using drag equals 0.5 times surface area of direction of travel times density times drag coefficient times velocity to figure out a lift to drag ratio at 300 kilometers per hour, the average maintaining cruising speed of most modern aircraft. Once all this is done, we then put it all together for you guys. Lastly, please remember that this is science, and as a scientist, I can say if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm allowed to be, because guess what? Science is wrong sometimes.
And we started so well today with the Chaos Boys.
Something save me, please. Please save me.
Well, this next thing might just do that. The Helldrake. Now, this isn't so much an aircraft as it is a living mechanical pterosaur. Whichever spelling of pterosaur you want to use, the Latin version or pterosaur. But regardless, it's probably one of the few aircraft that can actually commit to close combat. It's armed with huge talons, and it can even sport a Hades autocannon or Bale flamers. And it has a wingspan that's even larger than that of a Storm Raven gunship.
It flies. I can't believe I said that. We printed out a 3D model of it and laughed. We did the mathematical calculations, and we're almost certain we were about to have a repeat of the Hydra duel and just have it fly off the freaking mounting and slam into the wall and explode. But it flies. It not only flies, it soars. It turns out that its body is integrated directly into its wingspan, something we didn't account for, which means that its body also generates lift. With the amount of muscular structure present there, according to Professor Walsh, it should be able to fly in excess of 400 kilometers an hour and propel itself without any issue, including dive bombing at targets at faster than the speed of sound. It will break the sound barrier in a dive and be able to pull itself out of said dive. This is because it achieves a lift-to-drag ratio unseen by any other vehicle we have examined of 0.07. Almost its entire body can be used to generate lift for it to fly. It can maneuver very similarly to an eagle or a pterodactyl estimate based upon our wind tunnels and using computer simulations of eagles and pterodactyls in comparison to it. Except the fact it's massive and can generate enough lift to pick up and throw a tank. Much less the fact it can achieve 400 kilometers per hour in level flight, which can easily keep up with Imperial transports, and according to the simulation we ran, it can dive bomb at Mach 1.3.
Impressive.
This vehicle acts like a natural creature. It can turn and flip as you would expect of an aerial predator. I hate to admit it as a scientist, but this Drake doesn't need a whole lot more science other than it flies and moves exactly like you would expect it to. A real-life fucking dragon. Pardon my French. I'm just that shocked that this thing actually works. Firepower-wise, the autocannons aren't very impressive, but it has a flamethrower that can shoot through metal. Based upon pictures and lore of it shooting fire that penetrates a Valkyrie's cockpit from top through the bottom and continues downward to incinerate additional targets underneath the Valkyrie, I would estimate its heat of the fire at roughly 4,033 degrees centigrade, which is hot enough to temporarily set the immediate air in the vicinity of the blast of flame on fire. If you've ever said it can be more on fire, this can make it more on fire. But considering it has claws and close combat weaponry and grappling weaponry, it does give it an advantage over most aircraft in the fact that it would likely prefer to wait for its enemies to attempt to strafe it and then turn on them into a grapple so that it can rend them apart with claws and teeth. How effective this would be depending on the weapon system used against the Drake, considering its attacker would get the first shot. But its attacker would likely be flying at higher speed and level flight, so when the Drake turns over and grabs it, the Drake then just has to hope it holds on for dear life, and it doesn't render its metallic structure or its muscles to be sheared apart. But considering that it can fly at Mach 1.7 and a dive bomb, I imagine it can withstand the forces necessary to grab onto an aircraft traveling faster than the speed of sound. Using its wings as a baseline, the creature would likely weigh in excess of 20 tons, which with its wingspan and amount of lift it can generate, as well as aerodynamics, is possible for it to easily fly. I can't believe I just said something that weighs 20 tons can actually get off the ground. But the armor plating on its wing, indicated by its wings, is roughly 2 meters thick. This means anything that isn't anti-tank weaponry is going to not affect it. A minimum caliber of 70 millimeters or a 50 millimeter traveling at minimum of 300 meters per second would have to, made of tungsten titanium alloy, would be required to actually punch its armor.
Essentially, you're going to need at least Imperial Knight caliber weaponry to puncture its hide.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this. The dragon flies. It's armored like a dragon, and it will rip you apart and burn you alive like one. This is literally a functional mecha dragon. I kind of want one.
Smaug digivolved into Mecha Smaug, it seems.
Did you just make a Digimon reference?
I did make a Digimon reference, yeah.
I'm proud of you. Because a Pokemon reference would have made me flip my shit. But that's good. That's good.
Digimon's better than Pokemon. But anyway, moving on. Moving on. The Dreadclaw drop pod. Now, it may seem weird for us to look at a drop pod, but these are actually independent drop ships, because unlike Imperial drop pods, these can actually take off again after landing. They are armed with spiked maws that can actually drill through the hulls of ships. And yeah, they just drop down, disgorge their payload, and then take off again.
Alright, so the Dreadclaw would be able to lift itself off the ground. I have no doubt about that. It has similar characteristics to a heavy payload space shuttle in terms of weight once it drops off its payload of Marines and tanks and the like. The problem is that just like the Space Marine drop pod, if I may refresh your memory, without an absolute maximum amount of thrust and a huge impact harness to prevent it from slamming into the ground, and by doing so exposing itself to large amounts of anti-aircraft fire for a prolonged period of time, I'm sorry, you would kill everyone inside. This would be like everyone inside being in a car wreck without a seatbelt at 288 kilometers an hour into a brick wall.
Yeah, but for spacemen, that's just a mild headache.
I hate to say it, Chaos, you were doing so well to some degree, and then you went all Imperium of Man on us. But yeah, it can lift itself back off. I have no doubt about that. The size of the rocket and the amount of fuel that would be reserved for it, just based on sheer mechanical physics, it can lift itself back off. It has about the same amount of fuel estimated as a single booster rocket from the space shuttle, as well as the same amount of booster thrust you would expect to find from the main booster. For those who don't know, booster rockets are the white ones, and the big orange one is the main secondary booster. Yeah, it has about that much thrust coming out of the bottom. You would just want to hopefully use that to slow it down slowly, and then just hope you endure the anti-aircraft fire flying at you while you're trying to land.
And the final item we'll be taking a look at today is very similar to the Dreadclaw, which is the Charybdis Assault Claw. Now, unlike the Dreadclaw, this thing is not only larger, it's also a lot more heavily armed. It's armed with Storm-class missile launchers and melter cutters, and are even used as tank hunters to basically ram into enemy tanks in low-altitude attack runs.
I believe it. I don't have a hell of a lot to say. I would say, the Space Marines inside wouldn't be dead. They'd be severely injured upon landing unless you did the whole I'm going to slow down to virtually no speed at all. Due to its size and mass, it would win a war in a tank ram, and it does have enough booster thrust to exceed 30 million newtons of force, which is plenty of thrust to get it off the ground and also to ram into targets. However, this would still be the equivalent of being in a car crash at 55 miles an hour with your seatbelt on and airbags. There's a pretty good chance you'll survive the impact into the brick wall. There's not a hell of a lot of chance you'll be walking away afterwards, much less running out to fight. But you will be alive. There is also the fact that it has an extra set of exterior thrusting rockets, unlike the Dreadclaw, that can provide it with some degree of control, thereby allowing it to steer for a specific object or landing zone, as opposed to the Dreadclaw that just has the ability to slow itself down, and if knocked off course, the Dreadclaw will literally just land wherever it may. This also includes an additional ring of claws, inner ring in addition to the large outer ring of claws to land on. These will provide a crumple zone for landing so that troops and crew inside aren't immediately turned into paste in their boots should you have a high velocity landing. But I must emphasize that it would have to slow down to dangerously low speeds that would make it very vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire to land successfully without leaving the people inside very badly injured.
At least with the missile launchers now, that gives it some degree of protection against interceptors.
I imagine it has some degree of protection against interceptors. I also imagine it has several missiles that are designed for counter missiles to fire out to distract anti-aircraft air-to-ground and air-to-air missile fire, basically acting as a decoy for radar-based missile launches, as well as probably a huge collection of flares to launch to counter heat-based missile detection systems. Not to mention the fact that the melta cutters would allow it to literally land on top of a bunker and just cut in.
Down to a bunker, cut yourself in, let loose a whole bunch of corn berserkers, you're laughing.
You're laughing all the way as you place the skulls on the skull throat.
Exactly. So that's the last of the vehicles for this episode of Aeronautica. So thank you everyone who's joined us today. How did Chaos fare overall in our rankings?
They're very mixed set of things, because their first aircraft and the Helldrake work. Their bomber I don't think could fly, and the Hellblade just seems like a bad design flaw. So at least their drop pods work properly, unlike the Tyranids and the Space Marines.
So somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere definitely towards. I would say that they're better than the Space Marines and the Eldar and the Nids, but I think that's how the Orc and the Imperial Guard have them beat pretty badly. I think we have one more episode where we're just going to cover a collection of different vehicles, because I think the Necrons only have, like, what, 3, and the Dark Eldar have 2?
Something like that, yes. So, until that episode comes up, this has been Renmo's from 40k Theories.
And this has been Fiaura, and I promise you that episode will come up sooner, because I don't have con work to do between now and then.
And we'll see you all again next time. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.